Most of you are aware, my name is Joby Jester. I am the GENIVI Security Team lead, and I am here with Brandon, who is coming here from ASRG. Brandon?
Sure. I'm the Americas Director for ASRG. Hopefully you got to check out that video, but what the ASRG is a community-driven approach, getting engineers and everyone, people looking to enter automotive security in the same room talking about the automotive security industry. And we're partnered with GENIVI, providing back and forth information between the two organizations to make sure that we're both providing effective solutions to the industry.
So a little bit of a preface of what we're talking about today. So when I talk about trends, I'm talking about market trends, market capitalization for service and sales and revenue, and obviously, what is needed for the industry. We're going to do a couple different solutions here. We're going to talk about in-vehicle and the V2X space, and then we're going to talk about cloud managed type services. So starting off, in-vehicle software security. If you look at the trends today, there's not a lot moving as far as true software security inside of the vehicle. Most of it comes in the form of connected gateways. And right now, there's a trending upwards of bus network security and ECU cybersecurity software. Many of these we won't see realized until 24 or 25 at the earliest, as far as like revenue for sales, just due to the way that things are sourced. So what does that mean in real terms? Right now, most of the solutions that you're seeing are either homegrown or are part of a BSP or something that is coming from a compiler or hardware. And we see things moving directly into hardware as well. Brandon, from your experience for in-vehicle security software, are you seeing many vendors or platforms that are being developed that you think will be highly profitable?
Joby, that's a great question. I think that the industry has always struggled with understanding, how do you pay for it? How do you pay for in-vehicle security solutions? Because the reality is, a single component in a vehicle, even a single piece of software scaled across a lot of vehicles, ends up costing a lot of money when you're talking about the development processes of an automaker. So not really. In the years I've been in the automotive security space, I've seen gateways be integrated into the vehicle as a means to protect the most sensitive networks of the vehicle from those less trusted networks. From there, I've tended to see a lot of the solutions live outside of the vehicle. So, Joby, I don't think so. I think that is changing, though, because now that there's regulatory pressure that's coming in the space, I think that gives everyone kind of the same set of solutions and language to talk about, where if there are going to be more in-vehicle security solutions, then it'll be to address that business need of type approval or of meeting a regulation. And that truly, in my opinion, is the only business driver behind in-vehicle solutions that I've seen actually cause any kind of movement.
Absolutely. Yeah, from my experience, for some of I've worked in an OEM, and I know for a fact that we weren't purchasing a lot of things. Everything was being developed in-house. And now working for a supplier, obviously we see what is available out there on the market. And really the thing that's hurting us is, of course, the question is like, how do we buy you guys? How do we buy what we need? Can we pick what we want? Can you have to buy everything? It's a really big question on the industry. And I think over the next few years, as ECUs get more complex, there are more complex and more, maybe not dangerous, but more financially disastrous type of attacks happening, that I think software in vehicle software is going to be a different landscape. It's not going to be traditional, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there, especially for those that are tier 2s or below, or software suppliers that are providing to the hardware providers.
Yeah, and I think just kind of one last point on that is I think you may be right there that if there is an attack or kind of these attacks that we see, which I think upstream, not to plug a company, but they put out this kind of report that summarizes the different attacks that we see at some frequency, and I think that's incredibly helpful because a lot of times we are thinking and conceptualizing the types of attacks that could impact a vehicle, and that makes it scary. But the reality in the actual, what you're actually seeing attackers do are more financially motivated things. And Joby, I think as that increases, you're right that you'll start to see solutions being inserted in that directly address those, in response to those attacks.
Yeah, and not to poke fun at our previous cohorts, but in-vehicle payments, guys, they're coming for you. We'll be ready. Next trends. So V2X and C-V2X. Some of those people out there in the audience may think those trends are synonymous with each other. I'm looking at it from sort of a cybersecurity landscape, what's going on, what's happening. Just a little background for those of you that might not be familiar. V2X, or traditional V2X, known as WAVE or DSRC, it's a real world previously deployed technology. It's been in development for a long time. It was mature, it could be tested and verified for wide use. One of the downsides was it wasn't particularly fast. There was a lot of issues with implementation. And then there were some OEM dropouts in adoption of the technology for V2X, and that caused the FCC to reduce their dedicated band. So now we have cellular V2X, or C-V2X, operating on a 4G LTE or 5G band. It's being promoted by the 5G AA, building off of the 3GPP standards. There's a lot of acronyms in here. Unfortunately, I can't cover them all, but it's basically saying that they have a roadmap for development and its deployment, and obviously using existing infrastructure is a huge plus because it allows communication over things that we're already using on a dedicated bandwidth. One of the issues I see, and this is a market trend for a lot of things, is that the telecoms don't traditionally work in a space where it's controlling pieces of equipment. So like an OPT type network, at least in my experience. And that band, not that band, but that telecom technology is widely known and has seen abuse in the past. So using C-V2X there opens that possibility. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think in this space in general, I've been so excited to see here in Detroit on I-75, they've started a pilot program for some roadside V2X units. I think that across the country, you're starting to see some investment in infrastructure to support these technologies. To your point earlier, these protocols from a security standpoint have been around for a while. They've been thought through. There's a lot of well-defined security problems here, kind of spoofing V2X messages and so on. The trend that I see in the space is that, I tend to have conversations from the infrastructure standpoint, conversations from the vehicle standpoint, conversations from, the smart city standpoint. But, a lot of these different conversations where cybersecurity is an aspect of it aren't really being had in the same room. So it makes me a little bit nervous that these conversations are not joint, where you kind of have to almost think about it. What are the risks of the ecosystem, not of any particular component? Because being able to compromise one thing will lead to lateral movement and compromise the rest of the infrastructure. So, Joby, I think that's kind of my only input on it, is that I think it's developing. I have no idea when you'll start to see this stuff move into production. I know it kind of is in some limited capacity in some automakers' vehicles, but at scale, I don't know when that goes into production.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a definitive date either. Obviously, most people are looking towards 23 and beyond when we start talking about actually, deployment and development of those stacks. But that's in selected areas. Obviously, we've seen big rollout in Michigan, obviously, Florida, some of the metropolitan areas of Florida have some big initiatives, especially like Tampa area, really green city, and they're looking to be, you know, on the next big list of places that are connected for automation and green technologies, and that includes V2X technologies. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that if you're a cybersecurity company, there's a lot of players in telecom for cybersecurity. There's a lot of players in cloud and edge, but there's not a lot of the management as you spoke towards in the, you know, between those different silos. You know, you have these people who work for automotive that are talking to people like Qualcomm, who produce the chipsets, obviously, and Qualcomm's talking to the people who are in the telecom industry, and there is some interaction, but maybe not between all the security team. It's not necessarily deep dived into, you know, in your previous talk about OpenXSAM, that systems engineering model, right? There's not a lot of integration there. So I think there's a lot of question around identity and access management as it pertains to vehicle identity management, and domain controlling, and being able to, you know, isolate and quarantine, you know, problem areas in that, whether it's a vehicle or it's a piece of infrastructure. There's a lot of room, and there's a lot of recommendations for it, but I haven't seen a ton of information or productization towards that market. Any other thoughts on V2X or CV2X?
Not really, other than I'm so excited to see the kind of future that it enables. You know, I guess my last thought is that if there's one lesson to learn from any aspect, any industry of cybersecurity, you know, if you think IT security or data security or even automotive security, it's always that, you know, cybersecurity is one of these things that enables these highly connected, highly advanced, highly technical solutions that you know, that are very exciting in the future. And so, as I point out, that I think there's a lot of disjoint conversations going on. It's you know, I really hope that does move towards you know, specific solutions that address maybe the risks that the ecosystem presents, because at the end of the day, it is really exciting, and I think all sorts of new business models and mobility models will come out of it that you know, are hard to even think about right now. So that's my final thought, Joby.
Awesome. Yes, we have about 5 minutes left. I'd like to jump into cloud security service because there's quite a bit here, honestly. I'd like to let you start because, you know, I think you're probably the expert out of the two of us on at least secure operations centers. Can you go a little bit more into the trends for SOCs?
Sure. Yeah, so the Security Operations Center, this idea of having all these different data streams coming into one centralized SIEM, if you will, that you're monitoring to detect and respond to cyber attacks. That is being applied to the automotive industry to monitor vehicles. A key business driver here is that same point that you know, that I've been consistent on, which is there's a regulatory pressure where you need to be performing monitoring for vehicles. So, you know, there's a lot of key questions in this area, which is, how do you pay for it? Again, you know, if you close your eyes and imagine a team of security analysts that are monitoring all these vehicles for a given automaker, are they able to detect an attack against a vehicle? Is software doing that? If so, you know, is the analyst able to respond to it? If they aren't able to respond to it in time, who's held liable? There's so many questions in this space, but again, regulatory pressure is kind of forcing the implementation of this. So you know, what we're seeing in the space is a lot of interest in prototypes. You know, that's how I would describe it, is that, you know, you'll see one kind of automaker thinking about, hey, we already have a CM. Could we leverage that? And could we, you know, start building data feeds into it? You'll see some startups that are creating VSOC solutions that are custom tailored, where, you know, there's a sensor in the vehicle. You'll see other startups that don't have a sensor in the vehicle. We've seen every implementation and every thought process be a little bit different, but ultimately we do end up seeing this trend of a lot of automakers really asking themselves, do they need new tools for this, or can they repurpose their existing data streams? Number one, do they already have a data stream coming from the vehicle that they could leverage, or from data at dealerships, for example? Could they scan the integrity of a vehicle that enters the dealership at each oil change? Can you leverage those existing data streams to stand up your security operations center? And do you do that on kind of traditional CM technologies? We've seen a lot of customers saying, "Yep, we're going to try it with the Splunks of the world or the IBM QRadars of the world," which is challenging, but again, we're talking prototype phases right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I would say that I have similar stuff. Other things that I'm seeing moving into cloud type managed services, or security as a service type things. Automation tools for DevSecOps. You guys had just talked about how OpenXSAM could be fully automatable at some point, and that's the hope, right? Validation, compliance testing. With all these regulations coming out, there's going to be a lot of need for services that are automatable, and they produce results in a fashion that can be done overnight, because there's just going to be so much prove out work to be done, that I don't think that organizations are truly like going to be able to fully control all of that. And then of course you have a lot of other things and that are going to be managed services, like doing security virtualization in the cloud, and digital twinning and a lot of other stuff. So got about a minute left. I'm pretty much wrapped up. Brandon, any other thoughts before we go and transfer to the next speaker?
Yeah, just gonna echo that sentiment in that we're talking about global organizations, cars sold around the world, cars designed around the world. These tools that we're talking about, when we're thinking about engineering the vehicle securely, they have to be cloud-based. It's the 21st century. There's of course risks that are introduced with cloud-based tools, but you need to be able to collaborate with engineers around the world to do everything from design to validate to audit, and then kind of my last point, which is ensure that that whole cloud that you're using to connect the vehicle to is secure. I mean, that's a really big challenge, and there's all kinds of automation that exists to constantly be scanning cloud infrastructures to make sure that they're not exposing data. So yeah, I guess that's all for me, Joby.